Okay, so welcome back. We're going to do a couple of examples. And we're going to use the trig identities to, or excuse me, the Pythagorean identities to find out what this is. Now, this is not the only way we could figure this out, but I'm going to show you using the trig identities, the Pythagorean identity, particularly. Okay, so now, again, I could use the ratios and solve this using the Pythagorean identity of x squared plus y squared equals 1. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the Pythagorean identity given in the trig form. Okay, so I know what they're giving me is this. They're giving me cosine theta is equal to this, 12/13, and they're telling me that the angle, not t, theta is in quadrant 4. Okay, that's fine. So, how do I get the other 5 trigonometric functions? Well, first of all, I need to get sine, right? Well, the way I'm going to get sine is using the Pythagorean identity. So I'm going to use the fact that cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta is equal to 1. And now I'm going to substitute in, and I know that this is 12/13 quantity squared plus sine squared theta equals 1. And so now I'm just going to square both of these. Well, what does that give me? Well, that gives me 144/169 plus sine squared theta equals 1. And so now I'm going to solve for sine squared theta. So that gives me sine squared theta is going to equal what? 1 minus 144/169. And so I'm going to write this as 169/169 for 1. So this is going to give me 169 divided by 169 minus 144/169. And of course I can subtract those two and I get 25/169. But, okay, so now, let me just double check. Yeah, so now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Well, if I do that, I'm going to get plus or minus. So I'm going to get sine theta equals plus or minus the square root of 25/169. Now I'm going to stop here for a second. The fact that this angle, theta, is in the 4th quadrant tells me that sine is going to be negative, right? Because only tangent and cotangent is positive in the 4th quadrant. I'm thinking only cosine. Cosine and secant are positive in the 4th quadrant. So that means sine is going to be negative. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify this, and this simplifies to negative 5/13. Now, some of you may have noticed that, okay, that makes sense because, by the way, this is a 5, 12, 13 special triangle. Okay, so 5, 12, 13 gives us a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay, again, you might have remember that from geometry or way back when. But again, you don't have to know that. But again, it confirms my thinking. Okay, now, so sine is negative, so I get negative. Now, here's where it all falls apart. It gets really easy because now we can use all the reciprocals, right? And the definitions, the fundamental identities, right? So I got cosine and sine, so now I can get tangent, right? So that means tangent is what? Tangent is sine over cosine. So that's going to be negative 5/13 divided by 12/13, right? So negative 5/13 divided by 12/13, which is going to give me what? It's going to give me negative 5/12. And then, of course, cotangent is the reciprocal of this, so that'll give me negative 12/5, right? Oops. Okay? And then, of course, cosecant is the reciprocal of negative 5/13, so that's going to be negative 13/5. And secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so that's going to be positive 13/12. And so that's it. That's how we get them. Okay? Now, what about secant theta? So now in the second example, I have secant theta is negative 17/8. And I'm given the fact that theta is between 0 and pi. Okay, so now, in this case, I'm given secant. So I'm going to use the other form of the Pythagorean identity. And that's going to be the fact that I'm dividing everything by cosine. So that's going to be 1 plus, 1 plus tangent squared theta equals 1 secant squared theta. So again, all you have to do is just divide everything by cosine. Okay? And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute in for a secant. So this is going to give me 1 plus tangent squared theta equals what? Negative 17/8 squared. Okay? And so what's that going to give me? That's going to give me 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to 289 over 64. Right? Yep. And so now I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, right? And so that's going to give me what? That's going to give me tangent squared theta is equal to that's going to give me 289 over 64 minus 1, which is going to be 64 over 64. Right? So I just subtracted 1 from both sides, and I rewrote 1 as 64/64. And so now I'm going to subtract, and what do I get? I get 225. So I get 225. So this works out really nicely. Okay? So I get 225 over 64. So again, if I take the square root of both sides, I'm going to get the plus minus. So tangent theta equals plus or minus the square root of 225 over 64. Now the square root of 225 is 15, and the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, so this gives me plus or minus 15/8. So now the question is okay, what is it plus or minus? Well, okay, so this is 1 over cosine, right? And we know that cosine is positive in the first and third quadrant. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. Cosine is positive in the first and fourth quadrant. Okay? So that means it's negative in the second and third quadrant. Well, since theta has to be between 0 and pi, that eliminates what? The third quadrant. Okay? So far, we know this has to be in the second quadrant. Okay, now, what about this? Well, tangent what? Tangent's negative in the second quadrant. Okay? So that means tangent theta is negative 15/8. Okay? And now from there we can get the rest of them because cosine, right? So let's just write them out. Cosine theta is the reciprocal of secant theta, so that's going to be negative 8/17. Right? Tangent theta is equal to this, which means cotangent theta is negative 8/15. Okay? And since tangent, right? So think about this. Since tangent theta is equal to sine over cosine, well then we can solve for sine. So we can multiply both sides by cosine, and so then so sine theta equals tangent theta times cosine theta. Well, what's tangent theta? That's going to be negative 15/8. Right? And cosine theta is negative 8/17. And so the eighths cancel, and I get what? Ooh, it's a negative times a negative, so this is going to be positive. So this is going to give me positive 15/17. Okay? And then I can get cosecant, which is the reciprocal of this, which would be 17/15. And that's it. I got them all. Have a great day.